This is DJ coming at you from the Fiero barn, and today I'm making this video because the assembly has to come back out of my car, and I gotta do cam bearings on this engine. The reason why I laugh about it is because, well, it's monotonous. I've taken this out plenty of times, but you know, it's not too bad. My setup's actually probably easier, being that I have a carburetor on this thing now. And plus I've cleaned up a lot of the wiring, a lot of the stuff that I've eliminated, and yeah. So, if you're wondering why it's all apart, I was going to put it back together, because what happened is I was on my way to work, and I ended up with a lifter tick by the time I got to work. Well, yeah, you know what? It happened probably just a mile away from work when it happened. I was at the last red light, and I was hearing it tick, 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 and I'm like, oh man, I know what this is. So, well, I get to work, and shut it off, and I actually go inside, and I'm like, asking my boss, Patrick, because he's a good guy, and he's been around long enough to know, and he was like, why don't you try adjusting valve lash? He's like, when was the last time you did that? And I'm like, you know, I haven't adjusted valve lash since I put the motor together. So we're about 500, maybe a little more than 500 miles on this motor since break-in. And sure enough, I adjusted valve lash and didn't fix it, didn't really cure it, kind of went away but came back. And I was like, you know what, I'll just tow my car home, tear it apart and see what's up. So I get it home, I tear it apart, and I found metal shavings inside the lifters, especially lifter number 6. So I spent the day actually learning how to take them apart, clean all the metal shavings out. And the funny thing is, the metal shavings weren't big or anything. Like, the metal shavings was literally like, there was no chunks or anything. It was just fine metallic. That's about it. And I was like, well, how did the metal shavings get in there? Well, sure enough, when I got back home, let's see, let me get a light. Kind of already ruined the surprise of saying cam bearings starting this video, and try to get in there. Oh, there we go. Dang it, now I'm blinding myself. Alright, well, dang, it's really hard to see, but maybe I'll just show the picture. Either way, what happened is the cam bearings have kind of like, I wouldn't say mushroom, but they kind of like mushroomed out on the bottom. And, you know, I haven't really done anything with showing my push rods. This is something I haven't updated since I got the motor together. It needed custom push rods for getting the geometry right. And, these are them right there. As you can see, there's the size. So if anyone else is doing the 260H cam with the 6-to-1 roller tip rockers, these are the size push rods you're gonna probably end up with. So back to on track. The metal shavings was because of the cam bearings, and I've talked to a couple engine builders that have been doing this for a living. You know, they build motors for a living. Not only do they build motors, they build race engines. So that's kind of a lot. And I was like, hey, Rick. Rick's a good guy. He's over at HBR Machine and competition engines here in Las Vegas. And so I was talking to him, and I was like, hey, what's this? And I was like, what causes this? And he's just like, honestly, he's like, I hate to say it to you, but you got a bad set of cam bearings. And I'm like, what? He's like, if there was any clearance issues, because I actually went over there asking a dumb question of, hey, maybe should I have ran bigger clearances on the cam bearings? And he was like, no, you never do that. And I'm like, well, why is that? He's like, your cam's going to start rocking if you do that. I'm like, okay. So before I talked to him on that, I actually called up Jeff. He's out in California, and his shop's private, and he builds race engines for a living. But I met him through a good guy, Lewis. So I talked to Jeff, and he's like, dude, honestly, I think you got a bad set of cam bearings. And I'm just like, it's crazy. My oil pressure's great and everything. He's like, yeah, but them mushrooming out, that's the destructivity of the cam bearing. That's nothing you did wrong. And I'm like, okay. He's like, honestly, you should just call Clevite and ask if they've had a bad batch, if they know anything about it. And I'm just like, yeah, but you already know. I've called up comp and everything, and it's always the runaround of that's your fault. So it's like, okay. So I went over to, and I'm talking to Rick, and he said the exact same thing Jeff did. He's like, no, dude. He's like, you got a bad set of cam bearings, and I'm just like, it's crazy. And he's like, this isn't the first time I've seen this, and I was like, well, I used the Clevite brand, and he's like, yeah. He's like, I've seen it with Clevite brand too. He's like, have you tried the Durabond brand? And I'm like, I tried the Durabond brand, but the frickin' the cam bearings for this engine were too tight. So when I put the Durabonds in and I tried putting my comp cam in, it would not go in the block. And I was like, what the heck's going on? So after trying the Clevite brand, the cam went in and it rolled fine, and I was like, okay. But long story short now, we came across a post about using small block Chevy cam bearings in a 6-degree V6. And I am going to give that a try because Comp is known to make journal sizes on their cams. Being a manufacturer, sometimes they don't totally go by the book. So like if it's easier just to produce out ones with just getting the lobe taper right and everything and just having the journal size stay the same as small block, I have a good feeling about this. So we're going to use small block cam bearings. I'm going to go ahead and start disconnecting the wiring because that's where I usually start. The fuel system on this thing's easy. I can leave that alone, being the fact that it's carbureted. And the way I set that up is I got my regulator over there, and the return runs off the bottom, and the feed just runs right to the carb. So that stays perfectly over there. We don't mess with any of that. All we got to do is, because the way I do this, I've seen it where people, majority of the Fiero guys will remove the struts. And I totally understand that because then you could roll the cradle out. But then if you're rolling the cradle out, you now have to take the CV axles off, the wheels off, while it's out of the car. And that's more of a pain. So the way I do this is I actually just pop the tire rod ends, the ball joints, and get the CV axles out. And I just drop the cradle. So once the cradle's out, then I separate the transmission and the engine and all that. It's a lot easier trying to lock the motor and the transmission with it out of the car. Which is why I just dropped the whole assembly. I don't bother anymore trying to finick around with removing a cradle and trying to get the trans out. There's just no easy way about it. I've seen so many people where they try and it's just a nightmare trying to get the trans locked back to the engine without the whole assembly out of the car. You're just better off taking the whole assembly out. It's what the Fiero was designed for. It's the reason why I own this with a chain fall. And I'm not saying you need that. You can still use a cherry picker with the trunk latch. I've done it plenty of times. If you do it that way, make sure you remove the rear bumper. And the reason why I like the gantry crane is because my rear bumper stays on. It's staying on the car. And I just go through pulling the carpet. And I got these holes, and I just run blocks of wood on the, you'll see. I use a engine brace that you'd use on like basically a front wheel drive setup, where like you could hold the trans and the motor while you remove the cradle and everything, or if you gotta drop the subframe, like on any front wheel drive vehicle. I run it underneath the car, and then I have the bolts going through here with the chain fall going to each. It's really cool, you know. If I haven't videoed that before, I'll video it again. That's just the way I do it at home. Not saying that's the best way. It's just as a do-it-yourselfer at home. That's been my meal ticket. It's been the best money well spent on this thing. Now back to the engine. So my cam bearings have mushroomed out on the bottoms. The tops are fine. It still spins fine. The only reason why I'm tearing it all apart to redo them is because I need to not have metal shavings in my oil to clog up lifters, and I don't want to take the chance if the cam bearing does internally fail to the point where a piece of it does come off, clogs up the oil pump. I don't want that. It's just crazy. You know, this motor has been awesome for 500 miles, and I just got the carburetor tuned on it, which that's over here. since I had the whole top torn apart. Now, that's my QFT. And so this is a 390 CFM 4-barrel. So when I did the formula, because, well, that's how I was told to go about it, is do a formula, find the biggest, the carb closest to the CFM numbers, which I did. 390 4-barrel CFM works for 195 cubic inches, I believe that is, because mine's a 3.2, due to the fact that I'm running a 3.1 crank and pistons, and I got it bored 40 thousandths over, so if I had to redo that all over again, I'd probably go with a bigger carburetor. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm actually saying that because I got some wisdom from some carb guys, and they were like, if you're in it for performance like I am, they were like, you actually want to run a carburetor that is for double the cubic inches. And so that's Uncle Tony's Garage that applied that. And Uncle Tony's Garage, he's a YouTuber and a lot of good information over there. Mainly a Mopar guy, but he knows all of them. He's been around for a long time. And if he was like, the rule of thumb is double your cubic inches and do the formula, and you'll end up where you want to be. And I'm like, wow. So if that was true, I should actually have gone with a 450 CFM carb, not a 390. And the 450, which it sucks in my end because I ended up customizing the 390, but with a adjustable metering block, which, don't get me wrong, that's awesome, and it gave me a lot of good knowledge on that. But if I did go with the 450 QFT 4-barrel vacuum secondary carb, everything's adjustable on that. It already comes with air bleeds on every circuit, and all you have to do is just adjust. Like, if you need all you'd have to do is just buy air bleeds. You wouldn't have had to buy an adjustable metering block or take a drill press to it to get a freaking intrusion on a accelerator transfer tube, because my carb 390 Holley 4-barrel CFMs apparently have the accelerator transfer tube inside the metering block. I know I'm ranting and I'm just showing you a picture of my engine bay, but I'm going to start tearing this thing apart and update you with the newest video of hopefully just tear it all apart and show on how to do cam bearings. So I was trying to show it way back on one of my videos. I know this is getting long, but I'm just ranting. But I tried to show it before, and I ended up messing up a set because I was using the wrong tool for the job. I was actually using one for a small block design, or not even for a small block. It was universal and could basically do any V8 cam bearing. It's just on these motors, you don't have opening or access to actually tighten the nut on the end, so it's just never going to work. And I modified a cam bearing tool, which I showed in that video, but I didn't show you how to do the cam bearings due to the fact that it was a very stressful job. If you could have a machine shop do it, do it. But if your backyard just want to have an understanding and see the stress of what the machinist has to go through putting these in, then I will show you how to do it. That's what my next video will be, because we're going to mess with small block cam bearings in these motors, and I'm sold on it. I really think my gut feeling on this is good. It's really good. I think all I gotta do is just drill a hole in one of the cam bearings, due to that fact that cam bearing number 1 has 2 oil holes, and just gotta drill that hole, and then it's just popping them in. So we'll use numbers 2 and 3 cam bearings. So the 3s will go in the center and the 2s will go on the outside, and we should be good to go. So next video, cam bearings, guys. This is DJ coming at you from the Fiero barn. We are the Fiero family here in Las Vegas. So the new addition, Christmas came early, guys. We now own a chain hoist, and this has made everything so much easier. The cradle is out. Now the cool thing about this is I had noticed separating the transmission, because I have to, being that the cam cap is right there, and I gotta get to bearing number 4 on the cam bearings, so the clutch and the flywheel all has to come off. Back when I told you I'd show you this setup, I'm going to show you it right now. So, right here, as you can see, we have a tee-off anchor with a chain. What those are is your actual anchor points that would go to like a front-wheel drive setup with the engine brace. So let me show you how this is. Now, every purist is going to be very upset with me because, as you can see, I drilled holes in the trunk. Well, too bad. You know, these holes been here since the turbo build. It's where I used to have my intercooler before I blew that engine. And I just want to simplify everything now. So, as you can see, we have a 4x4 at each part of the frame. We run the brace across. It goes through the trunk, and then through the trunk, there's a chain that tees that off. And then we anchor it with a chain fall, which usually it's a chain fall, but this time it was a chain hoist. And the cool thing about this guy was it didn't take any labor. We didn't have to manhandle things. We usually use a come along for a backup just for safety, but the chain fall now serves what the come along would. And our come along's kind of old and the cable's getting very, you know, you just gotta, it gets stuck once in a while and it just makes life harder. So what I'm trying to show you now is that there's the chain, the center point. And so what we did, which was really cool, this is the first time we've done this. We usually use a floor jack, one at that side and then one at that side, and then we'll lower the cradle down and then we'll drag it out using the floor jacks. Well, this time we used the chain fall to support the car as a backup, and then we moved the hoist over and we pivoted onto the motor and we lowered the whole cradle assembly down using the chain hoist, which made everything just so much easier. With it out of the car, dragged it because this thing, the oil pan's not on the ground. The cradle is lower than the oil pan, so you don't have to worry about skidding it across the floor or anything. Once we got it here, I separated the transmission because I need to get to that cam cap, which then I noticed that I was like, dang it, I gotta take the flywheel and the clutch assembly off, which I'm gonna wait until next week because, I mean, I kind of took both days of disassembling wiring, and the good news about doing this one final time, hopefully it's one final time, is I'm just going to simplify even more stuff. So as this goes back in the car, I'm going to clean up some other stuff that needs to be cleaned up. One thing that I noticed was I don't need to take the engine off the cradle, and the reason why is because, as you can see, we have a motor mount here. If I get the pulley off, I can remove this whole timing cover off, take the cam gear off, and then pull the cam out. And I should be able to do cam bearings with this still on the cradle. So that just made things even more easier. And I can show you, because I got motors on a stand over here, exactly what I'm talking about. So doing it the way I want to do it, as you can see, your engine mount would be here, and it's not in anywhere in front of the cover. The one thing you would have to remove it is if you were to drop the oil pan, because the oil pan will not clear that engine mount bracket. But the good news is, if you go around this, you can leave the water pump on, and all you gotta do is just take out the bolts for the cover itself. So the water pump stays on the cover, you pull the whole cover off. And that's the plan. We're gonna do cam bearings while the engine's on the floor, still bolted to the cradle. And yeah. Oh man, I can't believe that it only took a couple days of just removing the cradle, but I remember the first time we removed a cradle was not fun. Yeah, so you can see that's where the bulkhead wiring harness would go. Everything's just so simplified. Ever since I did wiring and everything, my fuel system is just that regulator, that hose going up to the carb, that's it. Otherwise, yeah, you'd have to, where those hoses end down there, you'd have to unbolt it there. But, yep, shift cables stay, bracket stayed, slave cylinder stayed. Coolant, what do you call it? The cooler pipes coming off the firewall for the alternator and ignition coil, those you have to unbolt, but that one stayed because I got my wideband hitched to it and I didn't want to mess with that. But so much clearance in here, you know. I'm kind of ranting now. I think I'll end it. I did notice that when I ran my spark box, that the power wire, when I sent over to the junction block over there, so that's just a wire that needs to be modified, because I was going to unhitch it out of the harness and then just put it back in the trunk, and I was like, you know what, this is dumb. If I ever have to do this again, single connector and I'm good to go. And you know, the plug for GM's single plug O2 sensor, I think would be the best modification for that. Just a single plug clip, done. So yeah, cam bearings is going to be the next video, guys. So part 3. If you guys want to see how cam bearings are done, stay tuned.